Hello and welcome to the Football Hipsters English Breakfast podcast. It's that time of the week again, Sunday evening, and myself, I'm of course Chris, I'm joined by my regular co-host, Mr. Ross Bramble. Good evening, Ross.
Good evening, sir.
All right, I forgot my own name then for a minute, which is never a good start to a podcast, is it? Indeed. It's been quite a busy weekend, hasn't it? So we've got a lot to get our teeth into. Well, should we just briefly start with the game that we haven't discussed yet, which played on Monday? Not a huge amount to talk about in truth, but Middlesbrough beating Hull 1-0. Big points for Middlesbrough, especially given what happened to them over the weekend, which we'll cover in a second. Do you think that's a decent start to the busy period that's upcoming for Middlesbrough?
Yeah, that's kind of a must-win, especially if you're down at the bottom. I think every team's looking at Hull at the moment and thinking you can get points from them. So if anyone drops points to Hull, you kind of feel like you've let yourself down. And I think Borough would have pinpointed that as a big game. So yeah, I can't really say any more than it's a fantastic set of 3 points for Middlesbrough. Yeah,
I like I don't know if you saw when the goal was scored by Gaston Ramirez's celebration. He was quite emotional, wasn't he, against his former club? Sort of looked to the sky and had a bit of a tear in his eye, and I thought, oh, bless you. Don't get many footballers like that these days, so fair play to him. But we'll get our teeth into this weekend's action as we always do at this time. We'll start with there's thrillers all over the place. Lots of goals this weekend, especially on the Saturday games. And I want to kind of start in reverse order, really, this weekend, because there was a rather large game played on Saturday evening. We got a couple of listener questions on this one as well. Just get your initial thoughts, Ross, on Leicester 4, Man City 2.
Not a big surprise as far as I was concerned. We briefly mentioned it last week when we were picking out games to look out for this weekend, and I kind of half cheekily mentioned that Leicester versus Man City could be quite good because Man City conceded so many goals on the counter. But when I kind of said it, I then stopped and thought about it, and I thought, yeah, you know what, I think Leicester could probably win that. And here we are a week later, and it's 4-2 Leicester. The scoreline surprises me, but I don't think the result particularly does. We'll get under the hood of Pep Guardiola in a minute with the listener questions, I'm sure. But I thought it was a big eye-opener for Pep and a big eye-opener for some of his fans as well.
Yes, indeed. Jamie Vardy hat-trick. Is this a sign of a player who's got his mojo back after that hat-trick, those goals, or is it more of a sign of a team that just didn't set up to counter his abilities, which seemingly everybody else has this season?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, that's the first hat-trick he scored since he was playing for Fleetwood. I think that was 2012. And his first goal in X amount of weeks now. It's the first time Riyad Mahrez has assisted him in the league since November. No, not November. That's the month we're in. The Liverpool win, the 3-0 win back in February. That was the last time he assisted Jamie Vardy. So wow. I don't know. I don't know if this is the start of something for him. But he's had a rough season so far. His form has completely coincided with the fact that Leicester have really dropped off. So for their sake, I hope it's the start of something. But I do think he was a prime player for the current Man City lineup.
Yeah, I would agree. It did seem to be his type of game. With regards to Man City, obviously this game was played in the heavy rain. They were 2 down in 4 minutes, I think it was. A lovely goal from Andy King as well to make it 2-0. Leicester, we've heard it all weekend, but it was a sign of the old Leicester. But Man City, I mean, where do we begin? We'll cover a listener question in a second, but Guardiola started with the back three again. They were 2-0 down after 4 minutes. He changed the back three to a back 4/5. He substituted his only goal scorer for Yaya Toure in the second half. It just all struck me as a team that were prepared for one thing, and then as soon as that plan went out the window, they had no other plan. And they just got taken apart. Is this should he be in panic stations at this stage?
I don't think he knows how to panic. I've read his biography. It's a fantastic book, And I don't think anyone can come away from that book thinking anything other than, wow, what an incredible coach and what an incredible man manager. The thing that was very obvious in his biography, the thing that's been very obvious since he's come to England, is that he can change the formation, he can change the personnel, but the style is always the same. You know, we're 15 games in now. He is playing the Pep Guardiola way at Manchester City, and he doesn't change it. You know, that's fine. That's up to him. It's his choice. But he doesn't change it for love nor money. And unfortunately, because he doesn't change it, they're going to get caught out by teams like Leicester, who just exploit the same weakness time after time.
Yeah, didn't they have exploited it as well? And I don't know about you, but I thought the 2 late goals kind of were a little bit flattering on the score in the end, because City were well and truly demolished. Let's have a quick look at these questions then that are relevant to this game. A1 at Ords First, he wanted to ask, do you think Leicester can go on a run now after that big win against City?
It's a tough one. I'd have to quickly have a look at their upcoming fixtures. I should have done that before we kicked off, frankly. But who have they got next? Bournemouth in midweek, then away at Stoke, at home to Everton, at home to West Ham, away to Middlesbrough. They're winnable. They're all winnable, actually. The toughest one there to me would be Stoke, because Everton and West Ham are in no sort of form. And Bournemouth and Middlesbrough are similar teams. They like to play it along the ground and they play on the break. So maybe this is a good opportunity to remind them that they can do it, and that's a pretty nice run of fixtures. So maybe is the answer. It wouldn't surprise me either way, having seen how they've done so far this season. But I would like to think they can now start turning a corner after that result.
Yeah, good question. That the flip side, of course, is maybe those are the exact sort of teams that Leicester struggle to get themselves up for. It's all right getting yourself up for a team like Man City. Can they replicate that on a non-televised game against a Leicester side? So that's an interesting one to look at. The other question won't be a surprise to you to know that we have had a question about Pep Guardiola. It comes from loyal listener Noma. Basically, she says, is Pep being found out, or is this just a bad short spell, or a short bad spell, I should say, putting it correctly? Both you and I are very sceptical, aren't we, on how much praise has been delivered. What do you reckon? Do you think, because it's a very long bad spell, I think, rather than a short bad spell? Do you agree?
Well, yeah, I think I speak for myself for sure. I think I may also speak for you here when I say I've got no problem with Pep. I don't want to see him fail in the Premier League or to see him have a tough time of it just because it's Pep Guardiola, right? The only issue I've ever had with Pep has been the fact you can't criticise him without someone jumping on you and saying, oh, but he did this for Barca, he did this for Bayern, he's the world's greatest, blah, 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 blah. It's the player's fault, he needs time for this, he needs time for that. That's the only problem I've got with Pep, and I've been doing a lot of research on this weekend to be as clued in as I possibly could be for this one, because after this result, like I say, I think this is a big eye-opener for everyone, this result. And just some of the stats. Sunderland, Hull and Palace are the only teams with fewer clean sheets in the Premier League than Manchester City. After the weekend, they are now joint top in terms of defensive errors with Crystal Palace. They have made 8 defensive errors. This is the first time in his career that he's conceded 3 goals plus back-to-back in 2 games. They've only won 4 of their last 15 games, not including the one on this weekend. And in that time, they've conceded 25 goals. For context, Mourinho has won 7 of his last 15 and conceded 13. Apparently, he's under enormous amounts of pressure and is the worst manager in the world. But Eric Bailly has also been injured for the last 10 of those games. So that's quite impressive, considering Bailly adds so much to that back line. We're not talking Pep down because we don't like him or because we've got a problem with him. We're pointing out that there's defensive issues there, and he's not doing anything about it. You look at some of the comments he's made. This week alone, he suggested that FIFA should be offering 4, 5 or 6 substitutes to help avoid burnout. Something that he's never mentioned before. I've never heard any manager say that before. I've heard arguments for winter breaks in England. Never heard that one before. Against Celtic this week, he said maybe one day we'll get a penalty. They've had 5. That's the league high, along with Arsenal, Leicester and Liverpool. They've had the most penalties. And then no one mentions that he's saying some really ridiculous things. After the game yesterday, he says, I'm not coaching tackles. I'm not training for tackles. What's tackles? You're in England. This is how we play. We play tackles. This is a very physical division. And yet no one mentions it. But the key thing for me, and to more properly answer the question, is he being found out? Yes, he is. And the simple way to explain that is just by looking at his quotes and just by listening to him and how he responds. You think of Bravo's debut against Man United. By anyone's measurement, he was awful in that game. He flapped at the goal that Ibrahimovic scores. poor control on one of the back passes, almost lets Wayne Rooney in, poor distribution from the back. He just had a terrible debut. After that game, Pep said, and I quote, I like keepers who attack the ball. Claudio had one of the best performances I've ever seen. He didn't. That's either a lie or it's ignorant. It's just wrong. He had a terrible game. You think of all the times that John Stones has made an error at the back. Not once has Pep Guardiola come out and said, John Stones made a mistake and it was bad and, he needs to work on things. Every single week he comes out and he says, we defended really well. He said it last week after Chelsea. He said it this week after Leicester. We defended really well. We played really lovely football. We played really well. He says it all the time. And it's frankly because the players are doing exactly what he's asked of them. Bravo is coming out to attack the ball. Bravo is trying to pass it around, even though he's not really in a position to be passing it around because teams press you high in this division. John Stones is not a bad defender. He didn't become a bad defender just because he joined Man City. He was actually very good at Everton. His problem was distribution. Now he's being told, pass it around. Make sure that you're not allowed to hack it clear. That's never been Pep's style. You have to pass it around. You have to play it back to your keeper, to your centre-back, to wherever. And he keeps getting caught out by back passes because people put a load of pressure on him. And after the game against Leicester yesterday, finally, we've heard some interesting things from Pep. I'm always interested to hear his opinion on the differences between England and Germany and Spain. Finally, he's come up with one. And yesterday he said, England is very good on the counter and the second balls. They're tough on the counter and defend so well. What he's saying is that in every other division, he is allowed to play it around the back and there's not much pressure on him and players aren't there to pick up on those kinds of back passes. Because they're not awful. Normally in Spain or Germany, someone gets to mop it up if it's a bit of a loose one. I've been watching a lot more European football. I've seen it myself. Chris, I'm sure you could say it as well, having watched a lot more European football than I have. If you play it around the back, generally speaking in Europe, there's one player on the opposition team around you, but they're 10 feet away from you. There's not the kind of pressure that there is in the English game. In this division, there is always someone there. You think of Nathan Redmond's goal for Southampton, a poor back pass from John Stones, and Nathan Redmond is there. You think of the one yesterday for Leicester. John Stones makes a back pass. He should go for Claudio Bravo. Suddenly Jamie Vardy's there. It's just the pressure. It's the pressure on the back line. But the thing is, Pep won't change it. He won't allow people just to hoof it clear. It's pass and keep the ball, which is fine. That's not a problem. But my issue is that you can't say that Pep's been found out in this division or that England is tougher on him than he thought it would be because the fans get up against you and say the players were bad, it was an error from John Stones, he needs to buy a new centre-back, he needs to buy a new wing-back, whatever it is. I'm sorry, but listen to him speak. You've just got to listen to him to know that he is okay with players making mistakes at the back because, as he says, this is football. This is football. He says that every week after there's a mistake. This is football. Good things happen, bad things happen. This is football. He is happy with the way they're playing. The only difference is the quality of the pressure that's put on the back line. Because up front they're doing fine. The issue is at the back. And yes, I completely believe that English teams are starting to figure him out. Tottenham did it. Everyone else has been doing it since. Put pressure on the back line. There will be a mistake because you have put so much pressure on them. Because the defenders want too much time. They want to play it around. They've been told to play it around. They can't hack it clear. So to answer the question in short, yes, Manchester City, Pep Guardiola is being found out by English teams that put pressure on the back line. And hopefully he can address it. And hopefully he starts telling players to hack it clear and just get rid of the ball. But I don't see it coming. So next week, watch out for it. Whoever they're playing in midweek will put pressure on that back line. They will find some success. They might not score 4, but they will definitely exploit some space.
Well, that was brilliant. I just sat back and listened. That was fantastic. Really, really good stuff. And I'm glad we had a question that provoked that because that was really, really good. And as you say, I don't want anyone to fail. I just get sick to death of the tired old notion in the English media that, well, because he is the hit manager and because he wears nice Converse trainers and he wears pretty jumpers and he's got this fabulous style, and I'm not buying it. I'm just not buying it. And I, like you, I think that yes, he has time to turn it around. And the other thing that we have to address, of course, is he said that, people say, well, it's not his team. He needs a transfer window. He had all summer and he bought attacking players and he bought one defender.
He had longer than that, let's be fair. He was announced as Man City manager in January and he's been scouting this team since then. If he really had a problem with Gaël Clichy, he would have said, I don't want Gaël Clichy, I want to go get someone else. He's had plenty of time. He's bought in things. He's bought in players. He's moved people out. I said to you yesterday, I think he's weak in that back line because he's got rid of Joe Hart. That's just my opinion, but I don't see any reason that Bravo has come in and changed it. I think he's made them weaker because the defence don't trust him. He doesn't trust the defence. He's not really clued into exactly what he's trying to do, and he can't do what he's trying to do effectively because people are putting too much pressure on him. I think Joe Hart, for all his faults, was at least competent in saving a ball and controlling his area and getting in players' faces when mistakes were made. So, I don't mean to sound like I'm having a go at Pep or the people that support him. All I'm saying is that there's facts and figures and quotes here from all the way since day one, and either they get ignored or they're just not accepted by people. And I'm sorry, but this is how it is. He's having a tough time, and I'm finding it very interesting to see how he does in England, but it's just the reality of it. He's having a tough time, and teams have started to figure out that you put pressure on him and you get goals. So he's a fascinating guy. He really is, but he's not indestructible, and people just have to realise that it's a struggle so far, and it's been harder than we thought.
Yeah, agreed. And the Joe Hart thing, I think that goes all the way back to not just him as a goalkeeper, because I know you and I differ slightly on his ability as a goalkeeper, but his leadership skills and his work in the dressing room, away from the ground as well, I think is a big part of that leadership. So I agree. And my only issue with Guardiola, genuinely, arrogance. I don't like it. Don't like it at all. I think there's a very, very big difference between towing the party line and saying something in the media to take your pressure off your players, which of course Alex Ferguson was famous for doing, and just being downright arrogant. And I do think personally that he's straying into the arrogance territory a little bit too much for my liking, but that's just me. Okay, let's move on from Man City then before we get the entire population of Manchester coming after us, and move on to they've got opponents this time next week will be Arsenal, which of course by this time next week they'll have sorted out all their problems and they'll probably blow Arsenal away just to annoy me. But nevertheless, just a brief line on Arsenal, because they picked up points from a 3-1 victory at home to Stoke on one of the 3 o'clock games on the Saturday. It's been a good weekend for the Gunners, hasn't it? If we'll cover the other results in a minute, but 3 points, went briefly to the top of the table. They're now in second on their own. 3-1 victory. Much to say on this one. It was sort of a good comeback, but not a huge amount to talk about in the game, other than maybe a certain Mr. Charlie Adams antics once again.
Yeah, well, I'm not Charlie Adams' biggest fan. The card with Xhaka as well, or the penalty with Xhaka, is an interesting one. I'm not sure if I agree that it's a penalty. I suppose if it happened anywhere else on the field, I'd agree that it's a foul because he's blocked him off and he has led with an arm. But there's no malicious intent in it. I don't think it's that bad. But it's been given as a penalty. I wouldn't have argued if it was a free kick, so I don't know why I'd argue if it was a penalty. As for Arsenal, very good win. They once again look like the most consistent team in the division so far, outside of Chelsea. But Chelsea have only been consistent for the last 10 games or so. So yeah, very, very impressive from Arsenal. They obviously had to come back from a 1-0 down from a good penalty. But I think the biggest story, I'm sure you've heard the quotes, I think the biggest story from the weekend was Theo Walcott's getting a new coffee maker for Christmas.
Absolutely, yeah. All the big stories covered on this podcast. Yeah, yes, indeed, he will be getting his coffee maker. So good for him. I believe Melanie, his wife, will be purchasing that this week. I'm sure that will get to the papers at some point. So we'll have to find a picture when that leaks out. But yeah, good victory. Mesut Ozil header was a highlight. That was superb. And I have to say, Charlie Adams aside, for those who haven't seen a very sly stamp on Alexis Sanchez, which was not highlighted by many of the media publications today or last night, but nevertheless, a bit of credit goes to Stoke. I thought they imposed themselves well for 20 minutes and probably will come away from the game thinking they could have got something from it. And as much as I've got to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of Mark Hughes, but he has certainly got some of those players performing, and he's built a much more attractive side than they ever used to be. And fair play. I think they're comfortable, aren't they? After that poor start, they're comfortable in the mid table. So I don't think they would have been expecting too much from a game they haven't won away at Arsenal for a long, long time. But that was Arsenal's job done. During the other 3 o'clock kickoffs, the focus was more towards the bottom end of the table. Alan Pardew got another point. Yet again, goals against and goals for. A 3-3 draw with Hull City. Good point for Pardew, probably, but then scoring a last-minute goal. But that wasn't the story for this game, was it? It was about a certain falling Scotsman for Hull City. Do you want to tell the listeners a bit about that?
Falling Scotsman.
Yes.
Yeah, it's Robert Snodgrass with his dive, and we can't call it anything other than a dive. I can't think of who it is that's sliding in to try and meet the ball, but he said on Twitter after the game that he was trying to ride the challenge, but the challenge isn't even anywhere near him. He's stepped away from him and he's taken a dive, and the referee's been fooled by it. I think that the main problem is not so much diving, because I understand why you do it. I'm a very competitive guy, and I will take any corner that I can take when I'm playing a sport or a game or anything like that myself. So I understand where he's coming from with that kind of antics. Same with Dele Alli last week. I don't particularly condone it, but I understand why he did it. The only way you stamp it out, though, is retrospective action. The only way you get rid of that kind of thing, if you really want it gone, is to allow the FA the day after to watch it back and say, you know what, that was a dive, you're going to get a 3-game ban or something. That's the only way you stamp it out. So it's a strange incident for him to then come out afterwards and say it wasn't a penalty, my bad. Well, why didn't you tell the referee that then? Why didn't you have the decision reversed if you're really that apologetic about it? But yeah, I mean, if you're Hull City, then you take that all day long, because they needed that goal and they needed that point.
Yeah, I think it's one of those, again, that both sides will look back on and think, ooh, we probably woulda, coulda, shoulda won the game. But I think it's Scott Dan, the penalty incident from memory. I think it was anyway with Snodgrass. But yeah, I think a few people said to us on the Twitter, and a few people I saw on Twitter in general, saying, well, if Snodgrass really felt it, just missed the penalty. Robbie Fowler, wasn't it, did it at Arsenal years ago, I remember, in a game from 1995, I think that was. But yeah, it's not the way of the world, I guess, now. When you're down there, I suppose you just got to take what comes your way. But that one will run and run. Pardew survives for another week. We shall see how that story progresses. Bob Bradley still survives as well. 3-0 victory for Swansea over Sunderland. He is. I mean, I can't work out why he's under pressure, if I'm honest. He's very new to the job.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's what it is, isn't it? It's got to be. It really is a bit sad that we put an American coach under pressure for that. But nevertheless, I mean, a 3-0 victory is pretty conclusive, isn't it? Given the fact Sunderland have been on a pretty decent run recently.
Yeah, I thought this was the biggest shock of the weekend myself. Not so much because Swansea won, but because they won so comfortably. Sunderland weren't really in it, and Swansea with a 3-0 win has made them look a little tame, which I think is a massive shock considering the form that both of those clubs went into that game. Defoe missed some very good opportunities. I think Anichebe picked up an injury, he carried on playing, but he picked up a knock at one point. It just seemed really odd that Sunderland had gone from so good the past couple of weeks and looked like a team that could genuinely still fight their way out if they could grab hold of another team above them, to looking as limp as they did about a month ago. It's strange, but massive win for Bob Bradley. I think that's bigger than the Palace one for me. I know the Palace one was his first win, but this was a very, very good, controlled, authoritarian win over a team that was, on paper, meant to go there and get something from them.
It's a very, very big result, as you say, and the criticism, I don't get it. I mean, okay, they went to Spurs and lost 5-0 last week, but it has to be said, again, Dele Alli cheated for the opening goal, and that's what turned that game. I really felt that, and don't get me wrong.
It does also have to be said that Swansea aren't a great team at the moment. He's come in and he's picked up the pieces from someone else's job, and he's done all right. They've not been brilliant, don't get me wrong, but I don't understand what people were expecting from him.
Yeah, agreed. And also, when you look at the fixtures, Sunderland at home or Spurs away, I'm pretty sure I know which one he would have put the priority on. So,
yeah. Well, let's be honest, he got exactly the two results that people would have expected.
Yeah.
And if anything, this one's a bit more of a shock. But if you'd said, all right, what do you reckon they're going to get from these? You'd say, oh, well, Tottenham will beat them, but maybe they'll get something from Sunderland. And that's what he did. Yeah,
exactly that. Well, a good win for him, nevertheless. We also saw Burnley pick up a win over Bournemouth. We could talk about these games for hours, but time is always pressing us. So we'll just briefly mention the Jeff Hendrick goal in this game. Have you seen that?
I have. What a goal that was!
Beauty, wasn't it? Did you see him score any of those for Derby?
Not from memory. That was the thing about it, is I've watched him a lot at Derby County, and I thought, wow, this kid's got some talent. And I never thought he had that in him. I think the closest I can remember him doing to something like that was back in the Euros. He had one of those kind of moments, and that's when everyone kind of went, ooh, Jeff Hendrick, what a player he is. Where he had one over the head and he went for it. But no, you don't see him do that very often in the Championship. But incredible goal, really, really was.
Yeah, the first touch was a thing of beauty, and Sean Dyche not very happy with the fact that Bournemouth were allowed to equalise in stoppage time at the end of the first half. He's not a man I'd cross, I have to say, Big Sean. He's doesn't strike me as the sort of guy who would be understanding in many situations. But a good victory for Burnley in a bit of a thriller, a 3-2 victory in the end. And the only other game on the Saturday was Watford and Everton. Good game again. Time being against us, we haven't got a lot of time to go through it, but a 3-2 victory for Watford. Okaka with 2 goals in his debut, one including a back heel, which was rather sweet. But the story we wanted to focus on, and again, fair play to Watford, we will touch on them in a second, but we had an email last week from a chap called Chris H. I don't know his surname, so I apologise, Chris, but I'm sure you'll know who you are. He dropped us an email, which you can do at any point as well. Basically asking us to justify our comments a little bit about Lukaku, because we had a little bit, well, I say I had a little bit of a word on him last week, and I'm not completely convinced. So he sent us an email, and the gist of it was he felt we were a little harsh on Lukaku. He sent us a few stats on the player himself. He said he had a little bit of a gripe. He said, I've never understood why why there isn't more hype on Lukaku. If you look at his goal scoring record compared to others, it really stacks up against some of the best so far in his young career. And he gave us a couple of stats here, and Lukaku with 119 goals, which is now 121, of course, before the age of 23. Only Ronaldo, Raul, Messi and Sergio Aguero had more at the same age. Michael Owen was behind him on 111 at the time. So, you being my guest, I will ping it over to you, and you can give Chris some thoughts on what you've compiled, and then maybe I'll lend my thoughts at the end. So what's your views, and maybe make a case for the defence that those people that still doubt how good he is.
Well, the thing to say with the email we got is I'm actually on Chris's side by and large. I have been banging the Lukaku drum for a few years myself, especially from his West Brom days, because I thought he was exquisite at West Brom. You know, what he did for that club was quite incredible. And I completely appreciate the goal-scoring figures and the numbers he's got. They are phenomenal, and he's in fine company. And I completely agree, he has got everything he needs to be world-class. You know, he's got pace, he's got strength, he's got size, he's a good finisher. You know, he's sometimes guilty of missing some much easier chances, but a lot of players go through that kind of spell. I am of the opinion that he has the potential and has all the ability to be world-class. The only reason I said last week that I don't completely believe the hype, and the only reason I disagree with Chris on the email, is that I don't think he's world-class now. That's the only way I differentiate. And you just look at some of the stats. The hat-trick he scored against Sunderland, I don't know if you remember it, but he scored a hat-trick against Sunderland in a 3-0 win back in September. It was the first Premier League goal he'd scored since March of this year. Over 1,100 and something odd minutes of football, and he hadn't scored in it. Before his double this weekend, which is ironic timing considering we knew we had to step up and say that he wasn't all that great, and he scores 2. But before this weekend, in his previous 5 games, he had no goals and had only managed a shot on target in 1 of his last 4 games. So all I'm saying is that there are gaps with Lukaku, and to say that he's world class, I think is hyping him up too much, which is where I think Chris and I differentiate, because world class to me is Sergio Aguero, world class is Alexis Sanchez, it's Lionel Messi, it's Robin Lewandowski, and I can't bring myself to put him in that category when you look at some of the stats like that. And you could get into deeper arguments about alive goals and dead goals, and if you're not familiar with the idea of alive and dead goals, it's, for example, in that 3-0 over Sunderland, he scores a hat-trick, but if you took the other 2 goals away, so if you brought it down to so long as Everton were winning, they could win that game 1-0 because, you know, Sunderland didn't score anything. So the only alive goal to count from that is the first goal, and the other 2 just kind of up his total, but they didn't really mean anything in the context of the game. So those 2 were dead goals. But if Everton had won 3-2 and he got all 3 of the goals for Everton, then all of them are alive goals, because without them they'd have lost or they'd have drawn. I'm not keen on that idea, because I think you can't ever measure the impact a goal has like that. I think all goals matter. But at the same time, you could make that argument and you could say that his tally would be a little bit lower. But it's stats like that, you know, 5 games without a goal, no shot on target in 3 of his last 4. That kind of stat is why I don't think he's world class now. I can't bring myself to make the leap to say he's as good as a Lewandowski or a Sergio Aguero or whoever else, because that's what you're saying when you call him world class. So for me, it's a step too much to say he's world class, but I completely agree. He has got all the ability in the world, and if you put him in a Real Madrid side, I think his numbers would fly up and he would be a lot more consistent.
Well said, and a good case for defence. I can't argue too much with that. I think my main issue with Lukaku personally, well, I have a couple, but the main ones I have, I do think he can be lazy for long periods of games. Actually, I thought yesterday highlighted it quite well in that he essentially sort of scored and then went missing for 80 minutes, scored again, and then came off the pitch. And I do feel that sometimes he has that almost kind of shrug your shoulders, well, if you don't give me the ball, what can I do kind of attitude. I'm not sure I like that. For a man who is clearly as intelligent as he is, and if you don't know how intelligent he is, have a look up on various websites. He's got lots of degrees and lots of qualifications at various different things. I think he speaks something like 8 different languages, something ridiculous, but he's very, very intelligent, and my God, does he get offside too many times. He doesn't use the intelligence he clearly has to read the play well enough, in my opinion, and some of the runs he makes, again, can be very lazy, and he does get offside way too many times, I think a striker should. And my only other issue is that I don't think he performs in the big games nearly as much as he should. And again, like you said, Ross, I think if he wants to be that world-class player, that player that consistently achieves at the top level, he needs to be playing for a big side and performing at the top level. And I don't feel Everton is the side that he's ever going to accomplish what he believes he can do. Sorry, Everton fans, but that's how I see it. And I have a feeling if he made the big step up, it might not work out. But as with everything in this world, it's all about opinions. And we thank Kris for his email. And if you want to email us, you can do. The Football Hipsters Podcast at gmail.com. So if a tweet isn't enough and you want to go into a bit more depth, drop us an email and we'll do our best to feature it. So thank you for that, Kris. We do appreciate it. Before we leave that game behind, Ross, I do just want to give a little bit of love for Watford because they're a club we don't really cover a huge amount each week. So, as we said, a 3-2 win coming from behind as well. Walter Matsari, he's quietly done quite a good job there, hasn't he, since the summer? I mean, there's a club that goes through lots of change every year, with players coming in and out to different clubs, etc. He's come in. He doesn't speak the language, or at least he claims not to. You know all about that with Pochettino, of course. But yeah, he's got them well organised. They sit 7th in the table at the moment, and they're quietly effective, especially at home, aren't they?
They are, and I think to most neutrals, they'd all agree that Watford are doing very well. I don't think the fans are completely on board because they've got, -5 goal difference, and they've lost 6, only drawn 3. There is a certain amount of pressure on him, and there is a certain amount of questions hanging over his head about his style and whether it's really pushing them on or whether this isn't too much different from what Quique Sanchez-Flores was doing this time last year. To most neutrals, I think we all agree that Watford are punching well above their weight and doing really, really well. But apparently there's a bit more pressure on him from the fans, and I'm hoping that they can get on a bit of a run and ease that a little bit. Maybe become a little bit more harder to beat. Like I said, they've only drawn 3 and then lost 6, so there's clearly an issue of seeing out games or at least holding on to points. So I think like I say, most neutrals would agree he's been doing very, very well. But I think internally at Watford there are still some questions being asked.
And probably will be forevermore as long as their ownership is in place. But nevertheless, I'll give a little bit of love to them for this week. Moving on then to the Sunday fixtures, probably be a little bit briefer in this roundup because there wasn't as much action in these. Chelsea got a 1-0 victory over West Brom. I don't think there's a lot we can really add to with Chelsea at the moment, is there? I thought West Brom really acquitted themselves very well in this game, and it was so ironic that they defended so well, and then it was an error from Dawson, wasn't it, who let in Diego Costa, who whipped in the winner. Very good finish, has to be said, but a bit of credit to West Brom and Chelsea. What's that now? I think it's 8. Is it 8 straight? 9 straight. 9
without
right.
win, and I think they're 2 or 3 off the record. I think
set by Arsenal. I think, yeah. Or certainly, I'm pretty sure it was during the Invincible era. But yeah, 9 straight wins. They're not really conceding goals. They just keep winning. Who would you give the credit to in this game? West Brom for their approach, or Chelsea for just keeping on going?
I think it's both, really. West Brom will be disappointed to have lost that, but again, you go into that game thinking, oh well, Chelsea are in such good form. Let's just hope we don't get absolutely trashed. And they did very, very well in that game, and only lost to a mistake and B, a absolutely fantastic finish. But for Chelsea, it was a case of just keep plugging away until you find the chance, and thankfully it fell to the right man. And at the moment, he just doesn't miss. So I think you've got to give great credit to both. And relatively speaking, I think both sides will be quite happy with their day's work. I know West Brom lost it. It's a strange thing to say, but I think they'll take a lot of confidence from it, especially going into a January window where they're expected to buy some extra attacking players. I think both managers at least will be quite happy with the way the game went.
Yeah, Chelsea just keep rolling on, and Manchester United, they picked up another victory today as well with a 1-0 victory over Tottenham, who just quietly have got off the boil slightly. 2 defeats from their last 3 games, and they haven't scored in this game either. I watched this. I've got to be honest, it wasn't exactly a belter. The winning goal from Henrik Mkhitaryan was a lovely take. Got in behind the defence and lashed it over Hugo Lloris, and a good victory for Mourinho's men, although it was very much a kind of organised, old-fashioned Mourinho performance second half, where they just pretty much sat deep and looked at Spurs to come at them, and nothing really happened. I just want to sort of ask you on the Mourinho thing with this this type of performance. Do you think this is how he'll get United back to what he would deem to be his United, in that he's going to start doing this week after week, getting a goal and trying to hold on to it? Because it hasn't really worked up till this point, but there were signs today that maybe he's getting them better drilled once again.
He's done that for, well, at least since Inter Milan. At least since he was there. He sets teams up to get the goal and then to hold it. That's what he does, and that's why I quite like him, because he can balance attack and defence. He will say, right, we're going to go for this for 20 minutes, and they'll go for it for 20 minutes, and as soon as they got their goal, they'll go, right, fair enough, we got our lead, we're confident in ourselves, we know we can sit back, we know we can hold this. And normally, I can tell when Man United, or especially Chelsea, have done well, because Twitter explodes with, Mourinho, boring football, and I know he's 1-0 up, and I know he's got this in the bag, and it's easy for his side. So I think it's his strength. I think it's his greatest asset as a manager. The issue is when it goes wrong, it goes badly wrong with Mourinho. But no, this kind of result, this kind of performance is classic Mourinho. It's exactly what he does. It's exactly one of the reasons I think he's a fantastic manager and why I love him so much. So great win for Man United. And I was worried for them. I thought Tottenham would give them a much tougher challenge. But like I say, he just cancelled them out. Just said, you know what? Nope, we're not going to play anymore, and just killed the game off. Made it drab and dreary, and just said, no more football here, and got the win. So fantastic set of 3 points, and like I say, that was a tricky game for them. So full credit to them.
Yeah, he described Tottenham as the best team in the Premier League pre-game. I think there's a little bit of reverse psychology with the journalist there, but nevertheless a win. Tottenham, he disappointed me, to be honest, again, taking off my bias hat.
I'm sure they disappointed you a lot, Chris.
Well, I mean, taking off my hat of biasness, but no, they just didn't really offer a lot. I thought Harry Kane was really poor on the day. Dele Alli is, strikes me as a player who, again, I don't want to use that sort of terminology of a busted flush, but he's not the player of last season, and it does look like a lot of teams have worked out, if you get in his ear and wind him up, he's not quite the player that he was last season. And they just didn't, they never really looked convincing. Both fullbacks were not their usual selves either. In fact, Danny Rose was guilty of forcing Mkhitaryan off with an injury towards the end with a crude challenge. News on that is that he should be back for Boxing Day. It's not as serious as they first thought. He was stretchered off late on in the game. It looks like he'll be all right. So, just Spurs were disappointing, if I'm honest. And I think for them it's going to be a big week with a midweek game ready to come to see if they can get back into this title hunt. But nevertheless, a victory for United and a victory for Southampton as well, Ross. And we're going to incorporate the question that we've had into the podcast this week into this section. And it comes from A1 again. He says, can you see Saints going for a striker in January? If so, realistically, who would you like? This comes off the back of the news that you've lost Charlie Austin for 3 to 4 months with that gammy shoulder. But a 1-0 win over Middlesbrough today with a certain young man that I rather like, and I think you're growing to like a lot with the winner.
It's a great goal from Buffal. You can't take that away. It's an absolute rocket. How he's managed to get that much power on it from the pace that is already on the ball when he takes the shot, I don't know. It's lethal, and it's so quick that Valdez doesn't even move for it. It's a very, very good goal. The thing is that this was a massive game. I cannot overstate how massive this one was for Puel, especially after Palace last week and Beersheva in midweek. And if anyone watched that game, you would completely understand why it was so big. We have been goal shy all season, and I normally sit on this podcast and I say we took control of it. We didn't have too many problems at the back. We created some chances but didn't take them. It's usually the synopsis of Southampton. To be fair, that's been my synopsis of Southampton for about 3 years now, but it's more potent this year. We are just not taking chances, and when the chances are falling, they're falling to the wrong people. Shane Long hasn't scored in 20 games for us. Charlie Austin, before his injury, had scored 46% of all the goals we've scored so far this season in all the competitions. We are doing awfully up front at the moment. And the Beersheva game brought that into focus. The Palace game last week brought it into focus. So did Sparta Prague and Inter Milan. The Arsenal game, the Man United game. More games than I care to count. We've been continually poor in front of goal. And the one shining light we had was that Charlie Austin was still fit, and every time he was on the field, he looked like he could score. We are now without him for 4 or 5 months. Jay Rodriguez came in today. I thought he had a pretty poor game, all being considered. He missed an absolute sitter at the end of the game as well. I think it was Redmond who put it across the face of goal, and the ball, all he's got to do is make contact with it, and he's got it in, because he's less than a yard out, but he slid for it and it's hit him on the shin or the knee and it's skewed wide. I didn't really see him in that game. It was his first 90 minutes in 3 years, so that's great news for him, but I thought he was quite poor. I don't think he's the man to lead the line. Boufal looked a lot better when we put him in the number 10 role, but to do that we had to take off Tadic, and again, the Boufal goal is fantastic, but he's not going to score that every week. You know, no one in the team's going to score something like that every week. So I'm still really concerned about the forward play. At the back, no problem. You know, another good clean sheet. Middlesbrough didn't really pose us any threat. For the record, I thought that was the worst Middlesbrough performance I've seen in about 2.5 years of watching Middlesbrough. One of the most negative teams I've ever seen Aitor Karanka put out. I think he got his tactics all wrong for that game. If he'd gone at us after the week we've had, they could have caused us some real problems. But thankfully for us, they didn't. But for us, you know, you can hear it on TV now. There's groans and moans every time the ball's going backward, because we're used to dynamic, flowing football, even from the Nigel Adkins and Alan Pardew days. We attack. You know, that's what we've been for the last 6 years. But under Puel at the moment, it's all reverse passes. It's through the middle. It's back to the goalkeeper, and the fans are just getting wound up by it, because we just need to put it in the box. You know, I watched Nice versus PSG tonight, and Nice were just hacking a ball up long field on the 44th minute. Just trying to find their striker, not really expecting much, but because they did it, it caused a bit of panic, and Alessandro Player put it in the back of the net, and it went 2-0. That's the kind of thing we need right now. Just hack it long. Just try, because the passing around, the possession thing, it's dull to watch, it's very negative, and it's not working for us. So, with Austin now gone, to answer the question, we have got to look at a new striker. Even before Austin went, we knew we had to get a new striker in, because the goals have been really, really dry. But with Austin now gone for 3 or 4 months, we have got to get into the market in January. The one that we were interested in at the end of the summer, which we almost pulled off, except we went for Boufal in the end, was what's his name? The striker from Utrecht. I mentioned him to you earlier, Sebastian Haller.
Haller, yes, yeah.
The striker from Utrecht in the Eredivisie, who is a lot like Graziano Pella, except a bit more technical. You know, that's how I describe him. If you're interested in reading a bit more about him, Drew has written a scout report for him for Outside of the Boot, so I'd highly recommend going and reading that if you want to know a bit more about him. The one I would like is Alassane Player. At the same time, though, I think if we bought him in, not that I think he'd leave Nice in January because they're doing so well. I think he'd probably stay the whole season just in case the impossible does happen with Nice. But I would love to see Player here at Southampton. The issue I'd have is that he's a bit samey. He's the same as Boufal. He's the same as Redmond. He's not going to hold play up. He's trying to get in behind. He's a sharp finisher, and we've already got a lot of them, and they're not working at the moment. So, absolutely, we have to go into the market. I would be more surprised if we don't end up with Sebastian Haller, but as long as we've got a new striker in by the end of January, then I think every Saints fan would take that at the moment.
Good stuff. We will, of course, keep across that to see who you get in. I'd love to see Alassane Player in the Premier League, but I'd rather see him at a different club, to be honest, Ross. No offence. There's plenty. One thing there's plenty of young strikers in France looking, or potentially will be looking for moves at the end of the season. Could you get one in January? Well, if the money's right, France is your league to get players done. So,
do you genuinely think anyone? I mean, I'm not just saying Player, but do you think anyone leaves Nice in January? Because I know Cyprian is getting a lot of praise now, and it wouldn't surprise me to see West Ham go in for him as a replacement for Payet. But do you really think anyone's going to leave Nice in January? I know this is completely off topic because this is the English breakfast, but
not really. No, not really, because like you say, they're on such a crest of a wave. I mean, I think it would be more likely players coming in than going out. That they've got they're all getting game time as well. This is the thing that there's a few players that are rotated. We look at like Cosiello and Volta, and Cyprian himself has been rotated a little bit, but yeah, they're all getting game time. So I just can't see how any of them move on. Ben Rama possibly, who's a forward. He's only 21 years of age. He hasn't played much this season. Bossetti's another one, but again, not really sure that he'd be good enough at the Premier League level. So no, I can't really see any of them moving, to be honest. Not at Nice anyway. If you look across the rest of the league, then yes, there's plenty of strikers there. And another one that maybe Claude Puel will be quite keen on would be Coco at Gangom. He's only 20. He's a player that could be very much Nathan Redmond, if you will. Nathan Redmond did, where you can move him across anywhere the front three or as a centre forward, if you can build him up enough. So he would be an option. Nicolas de Préville's maybe would be another one. Money talks. Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Loris Diony is another one I really like at Nancy, but the trouble is you're taking a punt. That's the problem. I personally think the only other player that you could probably get who is sort of French or made his name in France is Michy Batshuayi. I think you might be able to get a short-term loan deal from Chelsea because he's not playing. Chelsea have got other options, particularly Conte only playing one up front. So I wouldn't be surprised if you could get him out of Chelsea. But
well, there's been a lot of talk about us being genuinely interested in Daniel Sturridge, but Klopp has said he's not going anywhere and he wants him to stay in January. So it's another possibility, but I don't see that one coming off personally.
No, would make a lot of sense. That's the one I must admit. Every time I hear it, I go, yeah, I can see that rebuilding of a career. Sada Berahino, maybe he's another one you could have a look at. I'm not sure that
I wouldn't want him myself.
No, I'm not sure Puel will be that bowled over with the attitude, but nevertheless, if he gets the right club, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. Callum Wilson's another one, maybe to look at, but we shall watch closely and see how that develops. But we all agree you need a centre forward. But a good win today, nevertheless. But a win that is something Liverpool couldn't achieve today. 2-2 draw with West Ham. I watched this one in its entirety. Liverpool went in front and everything seems to be absolutely fine. Then Dimitri Payet did what he does best, whipping in a delicious free kick for the leveller. And then Mikel Antonio, who played no fewer than 4 positions in the same game today, which was quite impressive. He started up front, then he went to full back, then he came to central midfield, then he ended up wide midfield. So it's quite impressive. He's quite the utility player. Ironic, given that he was playing against a team that included James Milner, of course. But bigger point this for West Ham, or a bigger 2 points dropped for Liverpool? Which way do you look at this?
I think it's a bigger point for West Ham, personally, because they would have probably been fearing the worst after last week against Arsenal, and then coming away to a team that is so good in attack. I think this was a very dangerous fixture for them. So for them, it's probably a much bigger point than it is for Liverpool in terms of dropping points. I think the thing for Liverpool though is that I think a couple of weeks back we had someone say that defence wasn't actually that bad, and I think there's a mix up in terms of I'm not. Neither of us are saying that Liverpool's defence is prone to oodles of mistakes. That's not what we're saying. They just concede too many. It's not that they're particularly bad at defending. They just concede too many. And that's come up here again. They've just conceded too many. It's just one of those games where they were frustrated up front, and at the back they just weren't good enough on the day. And this is what's going to slow them down in the title hunt. They just concede too many goals, and I think this is just going to highlight that once again for Liverpool. But I think it's an okay point. It's an okay point for them because West Ham are still a very dangerous side. But for West Ham, that's massive because I saw Liverpool go 1-0 up in 5 minutes, and I thought, well, that's it. This could be any scoreline you like. So yeah, it's a massive point for Bilic.
Yeah, agreed. I very nearly tuned out. It was only the fact that Schalke had a man sent off in 4 minutes against Leverkusen, which made me think, Leverkusen will be easy winners and that. And it turned out they had to get to the last minute to win the game. But I very nearly tuned out, but I stuck with it and I was rewarded. It was a very, very fun watch, and credit to West Ham, who Darren Randolph was made an absolutely stunning save in that second half to keep it at 2-2. But he also kind of gifted them the equaliser right after the break. So it's a bit of a sweet day for him. But as you say, I think West Ham will be the happier.
I think that was the first goal that Antonio scored this season that wasn't with his head.
It was, yeah, absolutely, yeah. 7 goals, 6 with his head. So, he knows where the goal is, doesn't he, the boy? And he's come through the non-leagues as well. So, fair play to him. And good point that for West Ham. Liverpool once again will be, particularly the Antonio goal itself. Actually, Really poor from Joel Matip, who's been pretty good, has to be said, since signing from Schalke. But yeah, wasn't his finest moment. And one other thing from that game, I finally worked out who Loris Karius reminds me of. Zach from Saved by the Bell. So yeah, look that one up.
He's a dead ring.
Oh, of course. I forget you're so young.
I'm a wee cherub.
You are. Our older listeners will like that anyway. Right, so that was the weekend that was in the Premier League. Just a quick check on the table. Chelsea are top, 37 points from their 15 played. Arsenal second on 34, and then a gap to Liverpool in third on 31. Manchester City now fourth on 30, with Spurs, Manchester United, Watford, West Brom, Everton and Southampton making up the top 10. Down at the bottom, Sunderland are back to the bottom with Swansea's winning this weekend. Swansea and Hull occupy 19th and 18th, or 18th and 19th, I should say, respectively. West Ham are out of the relegation zone now with that point at Anfield. Middlesbrough, Crystal Palace, and despite their win, Leicester still kind of looking over their shoulders a bit, with Burnley, Bournemouth, Stoke reading up to the 11th place and moving away from that pack, which is good for them. Just before we go to the EFL roundup, Ross, the midweek programme is coming. For both Premier League and the Championship. What games stand out for you Premier League wise in midweek? We've got a full programme, 2 games on Tuesday and the rest on Wednesday. Any of those leap off the page at you?
I would say Everton Arsenal, because obviously Everton have to correct this at some point, and Koeman has a relatively good record against Arsenal, but I still fancy Arsenal to get at least 2 or 3 goals in that game because Everton are just nowhere near it at the moment. Manchester City at home to Watford. Should be an interesting one. Like I say with Watford earlier, hopefully they can get on a run now. And now that they've seen that all it takes is a bit of pressure on their back line, then maybe they can get something there. Outside of that, I don't think there's any standout games. I think there's some pretty bog standard ones. You look at Sunderland, Chelsea, that should be easy for Chelsea. West Ham, Burnley.
Palace, Man United as well?
Maybe. But I'd still fancy United there. You know, I know Pardew is now due his 5 games unbeaten, but I'd still expect United to win that. Stoke Southampton, I think, is a bit tougher to call. I'm really worried about that myself. But yeah, I think most of the midweek fixtures, I think you probably look at and say, I could probably say who's going to win this one.
I could see Liverpool having some trouble with Middlesbrough away under the lights as well.
Oh, they've got to be better than they were today. They need a better lineup than they had today, because that was, like I said earlier, that was the most negative I've ever seen Aitor Karanka play as Middlesbrough manager.
I think they strike me as a side that's going to get points at home rather than away. I think that they look like it, like Hull, like Swansea, like Palace. They seem to be much better at home than they are away. So we'll see how that develops under the lights. And the Man City Watford game, I'm going to call it now 5-1 Man City. I've got this because I just think Watford, like you saw what they did at Liverpool, and they're just so. It would just be so Man City to now go and turn somebody over, wouldn't it? So.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't put it past them. They've certainly got the quality to. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We will, of course, cover those. We're toying with the idea of doing a midweek breakfast show at some point because of course we got the Christmas period coming up very soon, and obviously our European leagues take a break. So we're toying with the idea of slotting in a few midweek breakfast shows. We rely on your feedback, dear listeners. So if it's something you'd like from us, let us know. And we'll do our best. We can't promise because obviously we've all got lives and jobs and families and all that jazz. So if we get a chance, we'll maybe try and pull some of the main pod co-hosts away and see if we can do some shows. So no promises, but watch this space. Right, on to the EFL then, Ross, before we take another couple of questions before we leave. Let's see what's been happening in the EFL this weekend. EFL Championship, League 1, League 2 action. Take it away.
Yeah, there's been plenty of stuff in the bottom leagues this week, and the Championship has been incredible value. But we'll start with League 2. Unfortunately, the biggest story from League 2 is a bit of a heartbreaker. Newport County versus Morecambe was called off after X amount of minutes for a waterlogged pitch. The reason that's a heartbreaker is because Newport, who are bottom of League 2 at the moment, obviously, were leading 1-0 before half-time, and the goal was an absolutely sublime one from one of their teenagers called Tom Owen Evans. It's his first goal in, I think, one of his first starts for the club. It's an absolute beauty of a goal, but it will no longer count because the match was abandoned. It's a gutting for that kid. Both managers spoke about how amazing that goal was. And I think the Newport County manager, Graham Wesley, was saying that Tom Owen Evans had his head in his hands and just couldn't believe his luck. Incredible goal. It's been chalked off because of the waterlogged pitch. To be fair, you could have swum on that field, so it had to be called off, but it's such a shame. Other noticeable results from League Two: Exeter City 3-1 away win against Cheltenham Town, which is a huge result for them near the bottom. Cheltenham obviously have just come up from the not the Blue Square, that was ages ago, the Conference, and they could be on their way back down if this kind of form continues, but big win for Exeter City. Portsmouth went to Grimsby Town, which I thought was going to be a much tougher game for them, but they managed to win that one 1-0. Leyton Orient, I think they've gone 8 or so home games without a win, but they finally won one this weekend against Accrington Stanley. Carlisle, a 1-1 draw with Luton Town, keeps them right up in the top half and in the mix for promotion. The other big result and biggest game of the weekend before the games had even kicked off was Plymouth versus Doncaster. Chris, you'll know they've been pretty poor as of late, and we don't really know where it's come from. But they had 3 defeats in a row. Kind of worried for them because Doncaster have been brilliant the past few weeks. But Plymouth coming away with a 2-0 win in that game. I think Doncaster Rovers also missed a penalty in that game. So bizarre game for them, but massive 3 points for Plymouth. Puts them back on top with 41 points. Carlisle down to second on 39, and Doncaster also on 39. Portsmouth the closest team on 34. So League 2 promotion places starting to get a little bit tighter. League One, I think the biggest story for me, although there's a massive result in this division, but I think the biggest story for me was Robbie Nielsen started his MK Dons career this weekend, and his first game in charge of the MK Dons, of all places, was at home to AFC Wimbledon, which, if you know anything about those two clubs, is a massive start. And it wouldn't have been a major shock to have seen them lose, considering he's only just walked in. But they got their first home win in, I can't remember the stat now, but it's +5. You know, it's near a 10, I think. But amazing way to start your career with the MK Dons, to get a 1-0 home win over Wimbledon. He handled that occasion really, really well. Poor old Bury. I think there's now 11 games without a win. They've now suffered. It's a 4-2 defeat away to Bristol Rovers, which was never an easy task, but they did take a rather commanding lead in that game. I think they were up 2-0 before they ended up losing that. The biggest result of the weekend in League One for me was Rochdale 3, Scunthorpe United 2. Rochdale's home form has been really, really good, and it doesn't overly shock me that they got that result, but Scunthorpe have been so good this year. They are top of the league. They only lost twice before this weekend, but that's a massive result near the top, and clubs like Bolton and Sheffield United will be licking their lips at that result, so full credit to Rochdale for holding on to that. Northampton Town with a 3-2 win away at Port Vale. Peterborough United with a 5-2 home win against Chesterfield as well. I think we saw the quickest goal in League One so far this season in that game. I think it was Peterborough who scored it inside like 23 seconds, so that's a brilliant result for them. And if you're interested in Tactics Tim and how he's doing, his Swindon Town side lost 4-0 to Sheffield United this weekend, which puts Swindon back down into 19th. Coventry and Bury, both just a litany of L's on my screen at the moment. Their recent form, a real shame for Bury that they couldn't turn it around this weekend. They were second in September, and they haven't won since. Incredible turnaround for Bury. But the Championship, obviously this is the one that everyone loves the most because it's just the greatest league, and this weekend was absolutely fantastic. So if you haven't been following the 10 in 10, please do. We've had some fantastic games already. Brighton versus Leeds on the Friday night ended 2-0 to Brighton and Hove Albion. Really good game of football, very enjoyable to watch. Some odd decisions from the managers in their changes and substitutions, but nonetheless, a brilliant home win for Brighton and Hove Albion, keeps the pressure on Newcastle. On the Saturday fixtures, last weekend with Norwich, they won, was it 4-0, 5-0 now? 5-0, wasn't it? They won 5-0, and we thought, right, great, Norwich is going to turn this round. This weekend they went away to Barnsley and lost 2-1. Didn't see that coming, but a fantastic set of points for Barnsley, and Norwich just don't know. Don't know where they go, don't know what's next for them. Bizarre run of form they've been on lately, and that's a shocking defeat for them. Huddersfield Town with a 2-1 over Bristol City puts them back up to 4th now. They needed that, they really did. They've been in a bit of a slump lately. Ipswich Town scored their first goal in 10 games. I didn't realise they were on that kind of run, but there you go. They scored their first goal in 10 games in a 1-1 draw against Cardiff City. That was more noticeable for an incident with Sol Bamba, who went down injured. The physio then came on, he pushed the physio away, then had a go at the fourth official and the referee, got himself sent off, and then on the way down the tunnel, tried to get into a scrap with his manager, Neil Warnock. Never seen that before, never seen a player getting into a fist fight with his manager, but Sol Bamba is not the kind of guy that I'd want to get into a fist fight with, and full credit to Neil Warnock for trying to grab him round the throat and trying to throw him down the tunnel, but bizarre moment in that game as well. Newcastle 4-0 winners over Birmingham City, hat-trick in that game for Dwight Gale. Reading with a 2-1 home win over Sheffield Wednesday, which is a massive result because they had a really, really close run thing with Sheffield Wednesday in this game. But a big set of 3 points for them. A massive win for Rotherham as well this weekend. They finally got a win. They won 1-0 against Ian Holloway's Queen's Park Rangers, and by the sounds of things, fully deserved it as well. So fantastic 3 points for Rotherham, who are, of course, managers at the moment. Game of the weekend was easily Wolves versus Fulham. That ended 4-4. A brilliant game of football. We had 2 late goals in that one as well. Fulham looked like they were going to win 3-2, and we had a flurry of goals in that game. Absolutely brilliant, a fantastic advert for the Championship in that one. And the late kick-off in the 10-10 was Preston North End versus Blackburn Rovers, which is of course a derby match, and a very good win for Preston in that one, 3-2. Kind of burst the Blackburn bubble because they've been quite good lately, and that will hurt them. But a great way for Preston to respond after Beckford and co got into that scrap last weekend. And then today on the Sunday we had the derby between Derby County and Nottingham Forest. Really great game of football to watch again, and there is a brilliant goal in this one from Tom Ince. If you haven't seen it, personally I think it's the best goal of the weekend, and I say that having seen the Jeff Hendrick one at least 4 or 5 times. It's a lovely, lovely goal for the team movement and the way he's taken the shot after his run. So a big win for Derby County, if I'm right, and I am. That moves them back into the playoff positions, up to 5th now. So they are well and truly back in the title hunt. So amazing weekend of football in the Championship and in the Football League in general.
Fantastic, comprehensive as ever, love it. And Nicholas Bent their own goal. That's always fun.
Good header as well, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, very good. And that Sol Bamba incident, hot on the heels after that Preston incident last week. It's all going off in the Championship. And as you say, we're in the midst of the 10-10 now, so there's another game.
I believe it's
midweek.
Bolton tomorrow.
It is, yeah, League One, isn't it? Yeah, and we've got another busy fixture list of games. We haven't really got the time to go through them all, but just pick out some of the Championship ones. Is there any that grip you from the Tuesday and Wednesday this week?
From the list I have in front of me, I can't guarantee which ones are on TV or if any of them are on 10 and 10. I know Norwich versus Huddersfield will be on Friday night. That should be a good watch because, like we said earlier, Norwich are in free fall at the moment, it seems, and Huddersfield are slightly turning around their recent run. But you do have Norwich versus Aston Villa in midweek, which is always going to be a big game. Looking through, Blackburn versus Brighton. Blackburn are going to want a response. Birmingham City versus Ipswich wouldn't be bad. Leeds versus Reading, that's a massive game actually. Sheffield Wednesday at home to Barnsley. That's a local derby, isn't it? That rings a bell.
I think it is. It certainly isn't far away, is it?
Yeah, I don't think it's too far away. So yeah, that should be a very tasty game as well. And Queen's Park Rangers versus Derby County. The form that Ian Holloway's Queen's Park Rangers have been in lately, that could be ugly. So that should be a fun one as well. So there's definitely a lot of games to sink your teeth into this week.
For UK viewers, you've got Norwich Villa, Wigan, Newcastle, Norwich Villa Tuesday, Wigan, Newcastle Wednesday, Coventry, Sheffield United Thursday, and Norwich Huddersfield Friday, and Birmingham Brighton on Saturday live on Sky. So
not sure I'd be too happy if I was a Norwich fan.
Oh, and QPR Villa on Sunday.
To have played Saturday, Tuesday, Friday.
No, it's a bit harsh, isn't it? It is a bit harsh.
Ooh, yeah.
Nevertheless, plenty of games this week to cover, so I'm sure our listeners will be across those. And if you're going to a game, send us some pictures, or if you're a fan of a side that we don't mention very often, let us know, and we'll do our best to mention you. So please do. We got some lovely pictures actually of some ginger players from last week, so thanks to those who sent those in. Paul Scholes was the most popular, of course, but we also got a cracker from our friends over in America on the Arsenal in America podcast. They sent us a lovely picture of I think it basically looked like Cousin It, sunglasses and a hat, and he said, I'm sure this guy used to start at 10 for Dagenham and Redbridge. Quality, absolutely superb, love it. So thank you for those. Before we leave you, we just got time for just a couple of questions that we didn't cover in the main podcast. Our friend Jazab Shaheen asked 2 questions. He wants to know if Derby are one midfielder away from going all the way this year to gain promotion, and also wants to know what's happened to Norwich.
The Derby question is tough. I think, although he was only there for 5 minutes, I think they've benefited hugely from the fact Nigel Pearson was there, because their defence under Steve McLaren a couple of years back wasn't as good, but they've been very good this year. So good in defence, and with Steve McLaren back now, they've got a lot more up front. They do need something extra. They do need just a little bit extra just to kick them into a next higher gear. I don't know if that's a midfielder. It might be a striker. It might even just be a defender to just reinforce that. but they do need something. I do completely agree. They're lacking a little bit of something if they want to be challenging against some of these other teams that are going to be firing their way towards the top 6 this year. But I think they're in fantastic form, and I think, like I say, although he was only there for a cup of coffee, I think Nigel Pearson has done a lot of good work there that you probably won't fully appreciate until the end of the season. As for Norwich, I would love to be able to tell you what's wrong with them, but I can't. It's a shock to me. I think it's a shock to everyone. I've been saying since before the season kicked off, really, that Norwich were my tip to win the league because I thought their championship nous would challenge Newcastle and they'd be there to pick up on Newcastle's drop points. But Norwich have just been so poor in the last few games, and we were talking last week was it with Josh, that maybe Alex Neil is going to be under pressure, maybe they're going to be looking to replace him. Last week papered over some cracks. Clearly there's still issues. I would love to be able to explain it, but I just can't. And suddenly it looks like Brighton could be my Norwich. You know, they could be the ones to be there in and around Newcastle and trying to pick up the scraps and nip through the points and just pick up the ones that Newcastle are dropping. So, yeah, Norwich are bizarre, and I'm honestly stunned by how badly they're doing. They are one of the most surprising stories of the Championship so far this year. But no, I can't explain it, and clearly Alex Neil can't either.
No, it's a weird one, isn't it? Yeah, and I must give a nod to Josh, actually. I did tune into Brighton this Friday and enjoyed their win over Leeds, so well done, Josh. Our final question then comes from our good friend, the Pigman J. Hamkinstein. Would you say that the standard of defending in the Premier League has plummeted this season? We could talk on this for an hour, but just your sort of brief views on that, because I'm inclined to completely agree with that statement.
I am to a degree. I think the defending in the Premier League has been going downhill for years now. I think there are still some shining lights. I think, not to be biased, but I think Southampton's defending is brilliant. I think Tottenham's defending by and large is quite good. And when Manchester United actually get and sit back and play the way Mourinho wants them to, I think their defence can be very good as well. But yeah, there's always signs of poor defending. And I listed the stats earlier about 8 defensive mistakes for Palace and Manchester City this year. Clearly there are falling standards in defending, but I think the issue is that there's just no good defenders around anymore. You know, unless the only one I can think that's really going to be on the market in the summer is Van Dijk. And aside from that, I can't think of any world-class, brilliant centre-backs that everyone's going to be after. So, yeah, I do agree, but I don't think it's exclusive to this season. I think it's been going on for a few years now.
A word for Ben Gibson and Callum Chambers, who are doing very well at Middlesbrough at the moment as well. But yeah, I agree with you by and large. And I think a lot of it comes down to how teams are setting up. I think formations are way too open these days, particularly with these teams going at 3 at the back. It leaves a lot of exposure to the wide areas where you can see goals from crosses. So, yeah, it's not just the defending, but also the way that teams are being coached. So that's a very good question there, Pigman. Thank you very much. Right, okay, we will wrap it there then, because we had so much to cover this week. I don't know how we've managed to cram that into this time.
Well, we did, but I did spend 20 minutes talking about Pep. So.
You did, but I have a funny feeling we're going to get lots of responses on that, both good and bad. So please feel free to give us your feedback. I thought it was brilliant. I thought you covered it fantastically. So I'm sure we'll get plenty of feedback on that. So yeah, as usual, if you leave us a comment on our YouTube page or drop us a tweet, or as I say, an email, if you want to go into more depth, we will do our best to give you a bit of a mention on the podcast. This week's mention has to go to our friend Jimmy NN Guna, who met one of our other friends, Jason, who is over in America, and those two met up for a drink watching the Arsenal game. So a little shout out to Jimmy, who always interacts with our podcast on a regular basis. So best of health to you, Jimmy. Appreciate it. Right, we'll leave it there then. As I say, you can follow our podcast at the FH Podcast on Twitter. We do have YouTube, iTunes pages, and of course SoundCloud, which is our main hub for all of our content, as well as our website, which you can also find if you wish, which is the footballhipsterspodcast.co.uk. We've got some good blogs coming up soon, and we've got more content than ever coming your way. So keep it tuned. We'll be back with a regular podcast tomorrow. Slightly delayed release as of now due to my work schedule. The main podcast is now going to be released sort of late Tuesday afternoon, stroke Tuesday evening UK time. So apologies if you relied on it a bit earlier, but such is life. That's the way it is. But keep it tuned. We appreciate you tuning in, and my thanks to Ross as usual. Thank you, Ross, and good luck on Tuesday. You're playing Southampton next, I think it is.
Wednesday, I think.
Wednesday.
Stoke. I'm not looking forward to it, but hopefully the next time we talk on this platform, it will be a cheerier me.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for your time as usual this evening anyway.
Pleasure as ever.
And thank you to our listeners. Thanks for tuning in. Keep your feedback coming. We appreciate it as always. And keep it tuned to the Hipsters English Breakfast Show. We will speak to you very soon and enjoy your week of football. Good night.